A disturbing, had-to-watch 2 minutes and 8 seconds video have surfaced on social media. The video shows how the Eastern Security Network, ESN, that acclaimed security wing of the indigenous people of Biafra, Ipob, celebrated the abduction and beheading of 2 out of 3 police officers, has surfaced online, causing shock and disbelief across the social media space. The repulsive video featured some young men believed to be IPOB ESN members communicating in Igbo language and surrounded by 2 severed heads of police officers placed by a fire they set up as if being roasted in a remote place. The brutish young men who cannibalized the deceased clowned and scorned them, and even as they repeatedly stated that one of the 2 killed looked like a Fulani from the look of his nose. The 3rd officer was seen sitting on the floor with his fate unknown as at the time the video was released. Meanwhile, the federal government, which described the development as unacceptable, has vowed to bring justice to the persons behind the gruesome murder of the 2 policemen. Tundu, what's your take on this?
I mean, this is completely monstrous. It's beyond monstrous. Clearly, I haven't watched the video. I will never watch such a thing. But the idea that some people can be so depraved as to murder human beings and film themselves as if it's something to be proud of, and then to dismember the bodies and then roast people's heads, and then these are serving police officers, and they have names: ASP Francis Idoko, Inspector Emmanuel Akubo, Inspector Rufai Adamu are the 3 men there. 2, unfortunately, deceased and decapitated, and 1 alive in the video, which we pray he still is as of now. But this really, for me, is about the heinous murder of serving police officers and the complete lack of respect for law enforcement officers in this country that we continue to witness. This is so abhorrent, and the federal government cannot tolerate this. Action must be taken. And I really don't care for the other undertone of tribalism, which tends to rear its ugly head. Will be near perfect as far as I'm concerned as Nigerians, if we could get rid of that evil of tribalism. Talking about the features of one of the people they have just murdered and saying he looks like a Fulani, what on earth is that about? I mean, it's disgusting. The federal government must fish them out. This is intolerable in any civilized society. And I don't care who they are, what their motives are. This cannot be tolerated. It's beyond disgusting.
Dr. Obati?
Well, it's shocking. It's unbelievable. This is terrible, condemnable to the highest degree, that we will have a situation in Nigeria in 2021 whereby there will be a video in circulation of persons engaged in the act of murder and cannibalism and being evil-minded enough to record it and to circulate it. You will have thought that this will be, the kind of thing we used to read about in antediluvian times, in prehistoric Africa, when, cannibalism was the norm and people lived in a state of nature, the Obesian state of nature, where life was nasty and brutish and there was no rule of law and order. But to have a rules-based system, a country that has rules and has, laws in place, and some persons going under whatever banner at all would not only abduct, kidnap, serving officers of the state, but would then proceed to decapitate them and set up a bonfire as if to give the impression that they were going to engage in a cannibalistic feast. It is an indication of how bad our society has become. It is an indication of the kind of cruelty that is abroad in our land. The persons who abducted these 3 policemen were said to have done so on November 27, and they've been identified as members of the Eastern Security Network. Whoever they may be, it is the duty of the law of the state to fish them out and to ensure that they are brought to justice. This was the point that was made by Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, and I hope that that statement was made in all seriousness, Because in the report that we have seen in the papers, the organization involved was not just identified, the leader of the gang was also identified. I hope that leader of the gang will not become a ghost, and the Nigerian state will do whatever it can, will do all it takes to make sure that all the persons are involved in this heinous murder of serving police officers of the state are apprehended and made to face the full wrath of the law. The second leg of it, of course, is that this raises the issue of ethnic relations in Nigeria. In the video, the graphic report in this day, I thought the this day report was a bit too graphic, though. I don't know why the editor chose to go give all those details. You know, this is an indication of the degeneration in terms of ethnic relations. We were told that there was a reference to one of them looking like a Fulani, and that's Inspector Adamu in this case. Two heads were placed on the floor by the fire. Another, policeman who had not yet been decapitated was there witnessing the scene. And then how do you want, that reference to Fulanis to be taken? This was how the Civil War started. They believed that one particular person, some persons in one ethnic group were targeting persons in another ethnic group. And I'm not surprised that all of this has been extended in the reports that we have seen in terms of the trial of Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of Ipob, with which the Eastern Security Network is associated. You recall that before now, a group called highly distinguished Igbo greats had visited President Muhammadu Buhari. And one of their major requests on that occasion, that a political solution should be found to the trial of Nnamdi Kanu. They urged that, look, this was a case of political trial, and that in the interest of peace and justice and stability in the country, maybe the federal government of Nigeria should opt for a political situation. So I was not surprised when, in the light of this latest development that has been reported, that the Northern Elders Forum said that no, the idea of a political solution is unacceptable to the NEF, and that the trial should go on, and that anybody who is involved in any kind of act of aggression against the Nigerian state should be made to face the full wrath of the law. I hope that at the end of the day, this will be done. However, the other leg of it, of course, is that there are Nigerians, don't be surprised, who will come forward and say that why is this particular video of members of the ESN beheading police officers in circulation? Why has the Nigerian government not spoken up in the past when, Boko Haram, terrorists, bandits, whatever label you give to them, beheaded people, and that now it has taken this assault on policemen for the state to speak up? Well, I say that is neither here nor there. Whether it is Boko Haram beheading people or it is the ESN beheading people, it is the cruelty involved, the wickedness involved, the criminality involved that should be condemned. So going forward, the Nigerian government must see, of course, that the security challenge in Nigeria is taking a very dangerous dimension. When people go about beheading people, whether they are Boko Haram or they are ESN, it means that we're living at the edge of the precipice, and the state has a responsibility to protect all of us, whether we're in uniform or we're not in uniform. We commiserate with the families of the affected policemen. Soldiers continue to pay the supreme sacrifice in the line of duty. Nobody should be subjected to such indignity. It's a comment on the state of insecurity in Nigeria, and which is why it is sad that you will find public officials, making light of it. It's a very serious matter, and we hope that the Nigerian government will make an example of these persons who have been identified in the reports.
Right, that's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Rotu Sodiri, Michael Wilson, Adesu Amaro, and Aaron Akirjala to give us updates on Africa global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. See you. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesu Amaro is here. Adesu, great to have you with your fine hair.
Thank you so
with
much,
the hair, right?
Good morning.
Fine.
Morning.
Thank you so much, guys. Morning, Tunde. Morning, Dr. Bati.
Good morning.
Well, the coronavirus has infected more than 262 million people globally, and at least 5.2 million deaths have now been recorded with the Omicron variant. And what's happening in South Africa as an example, which has seen a spike in cases. We can only imagine what this week breakdown of data will show when the WHO releases it on Thursday. But let me show you a list of countries that have so far imposed travel restriction as a result of the Omicron variant. There are about 70 countries. As at the time I was coming on air, the situation is fluid. It can change anytime. But let me tell you that Ecuador became the latest country actually to join that list. It's in alphabetical order. However, the European Union member state comes last, and you know there are about 27 countries in that block. So when you add all of that to it, you can imagine what the list is like. Countries and territories rushing to put in place this travel restriction. Some people are saying that no one wants to be caught flat-footed, and so they have to do this to buy time, like the UK has responded. Like I said, Ecuador is the latest country to put in place a travel restriction. However, it added Egypt, not just southern African countries. It added Egypt to its list. Meanwhile, Hong Kong this morning also added 13 more countries to its red list. Apart from the southern African countries, it added 6 European countries to its list. It also added Canada, Australia, and Israel. So we're beginning to see the expansion of those travel restrictions away from southern African countries. It may be as a result of the backlash. It may be following the signs. It may be out of fear. We do not know. But those restrictions are coming into place. And it's just an advice for travelers to check what countries have placed restrictions before they decide to buy and book their tickets. Well, Nigeria says it's yet to record any case of the concerning new variant, Omicron. That's according to the health authorities in the country. The NCDC, in a statement, says the country remains on high alert, while the president's COVID-19 task team, the PSC, says it will issue a travel guideline today. But I can tell you some of the things we're likely to see in that guideline. The travel guideline will require passengers arriving in Nigeria to do a PCR test 48 hours before departing their country. They would also need to do a day 2 and a day 7 PCR test in country in Nigeria when they arrive, and they'll also be required to self-isolate for 7 days. Now, these conditions we hear will apply to diplomats as well, and it will come into effect on Friday, December 3rd. Nigeria yesterday recorded 26 new cases and no deaths from 6 states across the country. Meanwhile, the Nigerian government has reiterated its resolve to enforce vaccine mandates for federal workers. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, who is also the head of the PSC, issued a statement, and he says the date of December 1st remains sacrosanct, and all federal workers should have gotten vaccinated or present a 72-hour PCR negative test for them to access their offices from December 1st. Speaking of vaccination, here, guys, this is an interesting one. The agency in charge in Nigeria, the NPHCDA, has actually ranked the governors of Ogun State, Nasarawa, Oyo, Osun, and Ekiti, respectively, as the top 5 performing governors for COVID-19 mass vaccination campaign. Now, it's based on the trajectory towards states vaccinating 50% of their population by the end of January next year. Now, Ogun State tops that list with 3.3% of its population fully vaccinated, followed by Nasarawa with 3.2%. And of course, Ekiti sits at the 5th position, with just 2.13%. Lagos did not meet that list, of course, because it hasn't vaccinated 50% of its population yet. Now, the WHO is warning that the newest COVID-19 variant, Omicron, poses a significant global risk. In a technical memo to member states, the World Health Body says considerable uncertainties. Remember, there's a lot we do not know about this variant. It says the considerable uncertainties remain about the Omicron variant and the likelihood of possible further spread around the world is very high. Now, it's asking government to speed up vaccination while asking people of the world to return to those very simple preventative measures such as respiratory and hand hygiene, social distancing, and of course, mask wearing. We don't talk about that enough. Mask wearing. To the U.S., where President Joe Biden addressed his nation yesterday, and of course everybody was waiting to see that. He ruled out lockdowns for the US in the interim. There will be no lockdowns yet. The president says the new variant is a cause for concern and not a cause for panic. He also says his team is drawing up a longer-term COVID-19 strategy which will be announced later this week. Well, while all of this is happening, in a show of solidarity, yesterday, India offered to provide vaccines and medical supplies, including test kits and ventilators, to African countries affected by the Omicron variant. India says any new vaccine requirements, either through bilateral deals or through COVAX facility, will be considered expeditiously. Sounds like music to the ears for a lot of countries waiting to get vaccines. However, they're limited to the vaccines produced in India, which is great, which has been approved by the WHO. And also, it comes on a day Chinese President Xi Jinping says he is pledging 1 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses to Africa. He says he was speaking during an African-China summit in Senegal's capital, and he says that his country would donate 600 million doses directly. Meanwhile, 400 million doses would come from other sources. So, Africa getting the help it may need at this time.
Well, we'll take it. We'll take it all, quite frankly, especially because you've shared this news now that the top 5 performing governors have been identified, with Ogun State being first, of course. But still, the numbers are very low. It's extremely worrying. At a time where the conversation around the world is about boosters for everybody over the age of 18, we are still on, is it 3.3%? And that's the top performer. That is abysmal, frankly, which is to go back to the conversation that we're having yesterday. I really fail to see the point right now in all the self-recrimination and hand-wringing of, oh, we don't produce vaccines, we should. Yes, we should, but this is an oil-producing country that imports fuel but maintains a subsidy and maintains moribund refineries. So that should tell you a thing or two, that precious little functions effectively here in Nigeria. And while we have that conversation, we need to also take immediate measures, such as what India and China are doing. What we really need is vaccine equity. That is the conversation for the here and now in the face of this new variant. I mean, none of us want to learn the entire Greek alphabet. Can we just stop with the new variants, please? We all need to be vaccinated all over Africa. And I appreciate what India is doing. I also appreciate the fact that India has decided to impose strict tests on people coming in, travelers coming in from certain countries, but they have not had a travel ban, which takes me to Ecuador. Do they need a map of Africa? I'm really quite confused. What does Egypt have to do with southern African countries? It's quite bizarre. And also the report that you shared with us, thank you very much, Adesua, about the NCDC. What caught my eye in that report was that the variant was first identified on 9th of November in Botswana, brought in by travelers from West Africa. So I'm now thinking, because I was completely, offended by the fact that Indonesia decided to ban Nigeria. Nigeria is in West Africa, not Southern Africa. So I'm thinking, is that what Indonesia was thinking? But there's 17 countries in West Africa. We always need to be guided, one would hope, by the science, not just take these head-triggered, little panicked responses that really make no sense and have no correlation to the actual science. Look at Scotland. They have cases of the Omicron variant, and some of those cases have no connection whatsoever to any travel to or from Africa at all. The case in Belgium, all of that points to community spread, which is why I appreciate Hong Kong being scientific about their travel bans and banning people from the whole broad range of countries where there are cases of that particular variant, and they don't seem to be taking a punitive stance or prejudiced stance towards Africa, which is very important at this point. But it must be stressed that we still don't know much about Omicron, just beyond what we've heard from South African authorities, that the symptoms are sort of mild to moderate, and there have been no deaths as a result of that particular variant just yet, and long may that remain so.
Well, the WHO is definitely correct in saying that Omicron poses a very high risk. It has raised the level of uncertainties in the world. And Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus is quite right to say that this is a clear indication that COVID-19 is here with us. But the question is, what do we do? Expectations of high risk, uncertainties, 46 countries have imposed travel restrictions, 126 genome sequencing patterns have been observed with regard to this. Israel and Japan have even banned all foreigners from coming near their borders. So Ghebreyesus and the WHO are calling for global solidarity. And the big talk that I think is relevant is this talk about Intergovernmental Cooperation Pact. They've not called it a treaty yet, but they seem to be working in that direction. That the whole of the world, should come up with a treaty, if you like, a COVID pact, since they've not used the word treaty, under which countries will have specific obligations to be part of the task of ensuring the prevention of future pandemics and being prepared and placing the right emphasis on equity and the solidarity of the world. Because as we have seen, in terms of the spread of this Omicron, and before it, Delta also, is that, look, there are no borders anymore. What affects one affects all, and humanity shares the same dilemma. Now, the U.S. can say, oh, there's no need to panic. This is a variant of concern, but we can't panic. Yes, it is, easy and convenient for the United States to say so because they have the capacity. But how about those vulnerable countries in Africa, in Latin America, and in other, disadvantaged parts of the world? Now, you raise a point about India making donations. Bharat Biotech in India produced what they call the Covaxin, and so that's consistent with this call for solidarity. China, through President Xi Jinping, who is in a place called Diaminiao, near Dakar in Senegal, for the China-Africa Summit, is saying in addition to the 200 million doses that China provided previously, to now provide 1 billion more, 600 million directly and 400 million from other sources. But the concern about China is that, is China doing this, all of this, within the context of, diplomacy and using this to negotiate advantage with these vulnerable countries, particularly African countries. You recall recently China was in the news. China is going to take over the Uganda infrastructure in Uganda because Uganda could not keep up with the payment, which is debt obligations to China. And even now, in Senegal, at that China-Africa Summit, the backdrop to it is how, China has become the biggest trading partner, with Africa. Over $200 billion worth of trading relations with African countries. And the question, because of the opaqueness in Chinese trade relations with Africa, the question has always been how sincere, is China. Now, on MPA-CDA rating the states in Nigeria, Lagos shows up at number 6. The Federal Capital Territory shows up at 11th. Yes, for feel-good purposes, people from Ogun State, Ekiti State, and all those states that are up the table may jubilate. But if you look at it, we don't have enough details in terms of how the MPA-CDA arrived at those conclusions. But if you look at the details in terms of population, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of actual percentages, you may raise questions about that weighting. But what is important is that, look, states in Nigeria and the federal government will need to do a lot more in terms of mass vaccination, particularly as the US and the WHO are pointing out that, look, the way forward, whatever kind of mutation COVID-19 throws up, is vaccination. And that's why in the UK they are rolling out a Safe Christmas project of 500,000 per day, immunization. Would they be able to do it? Yes, perhaps they have the resources. And so Sajid Javid can say, oh, we are also not panicking in the UK. But other parts of the world are panicking, because it looks like the world is at a crossroads with the pandemic.
All right, we have to go because of time, but the best time to vaccinate is now, not 20 years ago or not 20 years after. It's now.
I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks.
Okay,
you're taking a vacation. Okay.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Reuters Sadiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Reuters.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning to all our viewers. We kick things off in Kaduna. Kaduna, effective tomorrow, effective December 1st. It's the end of the year. They are transitioning to a 4-day work week for civil servants, public sector workers in Kaduna. This, according to the special advisor to Governor El Rufai on media and communications, Muyiwa Adeke. And he said, well, it's a combination of things that has led Kaduna up to this point. They want to boost productivity. They also want to boost work-life balance, which, as we all know, is very important for the workaholics out there. They also said that lessons from the pandemic have, taught the Kaduna state government how to transition to virtual workspaces, which, it's a new normal at this point. They're also going to be putting out a legal framework around January 2022 if the private sector in Kaduna wants to follow suit, use it as a guide to introduce a 4-day work week in their own sector of the economy. They did, however, say that public servants, aside from those in schools and healthcare, can get Friday off. They still want to make sure that the emergency services are there if need be. 24/7 services for emergency healthcare and so on. Those are still going to be running in place. The government has been investing a lot in ICT. They want to make access to digital services something that is robust for Kaduna public service workers. And yeah, I mean, we'll see how this works out. I have to say, I don't know if you noticed this, during the lockdown, a number of states halved their, when I say halved the work days for civil service workers. I think in Lagos or some level 1 to 6 or 7, they told them to stay home while the higher levels could continue working. And people noticed that nothing changed, which led a lot of people to ask, well, if during the lockdown half the civil service isn't working in these state governments, do you need them? So that's a different question for another day. But we'll see how this works for the Kaduna state government effective December 1st. We move to Dangote Refinery. The National Nigeria Society of Chemical Engineers, to celebrate their 51st anniversary, took a tour to Igbejuleki to go and take a look at the Dangote Refinery. According to the national president of the Nigeria Society of Chemical Engineers, Engineer Sadiu Mohammed, the Dangote Refinery, once it comes on stream, is set to be the #1 employer of chemical engineers in Nigeria. Now, Engineer Sadiu Mohammed, said something very interesting. He said that Nigerian universities turn out about 1,000 chemical engineers a year. However, they don't have that many avenues for employment. And you have to think, if it takes something of the size of Dangote Refinery, 650,000 barrels per day, to be able to absorb the number of chemical engineers, then you're probably looking at needing to have other new ventures, new infrastructure developments from the private sector of this scale in other sectors to be able to absorb the new graduates coming out in those disciplines. There's chemical engineering, there's medicine, there's all these other sectors. I mean, think about what, we talked about the Central Bank of Nigeria and the TIES initiative for tertiary institutions to try to boost entrepreneurship and so on. So, I mean, just think about it. Think about him saying that, just think about the scale of what would be needed to absorb all the other disciplines from different disciplines in different universities across the country to be able to be absorbed into the marketplace for employment. So once again, there's a lot that is being looked forward to for the Dangote Refinery, not only in saving us FX, but if you can see the employment gains as well. We move to Flutterwave in tech. Flutterwave, leading tech company in the payment space, they're introducing an e-commerce service called Flutterwave Market, which is supposed to give businesses and SMEs a wider platform to access more customers. So remember, I think it was April 2020, they launched their Flutterwave store. And this Flutterwave Market is supposed to work in conjunction with the Flutterwave store to be able to give SMEs, to allow them to scale and give them more of a platform. So, look, that's how SMEs in the e-commerce space, that's how they raise revenue. They want more eyes to see the goods and services that they are offering. in order for them to be able to sell more, price times volume, you increase your revenue. So that's what Flutterwave is doing. We move to Uganda. Uganda's coffee exports rose by, I think it was almost 30%, 28% to $657 million. This is through October 2021, so the first 10 months of the year of 2021 compared to 2020. Now, the reason for this is because of supply chain disruptions in Brazil. Brazil is the largest exporter of coffee, but they've had weather issues, supply chain issues, COVID lockdowns, and so on and so forth, allowed Uganda to take advantage. Also, the Ugandan government, back in 2012, I mean, that was 10 years ago, or almost 20 years ago, they instituted, initiatives to try to increase output for coffee in Uganda. So they gave their farmers seedlings, financing, kind of like the Anchor Borrowers program here in Nigeria. So that's what Uganda. Now, interestingly enough, though, if you think about the African Continental Free Trade Area, Uganda's biggest markets for its coffee exports are in Europe. Italy, Belgium, Germany. I think Algeria is like maybe top 3 or top 4. So they have one African nation, but that, I mean, technically Algeria is almost Europe because it's so far up north. When you think about the African Continental Free Trade Area and improving intra-African trade, you want to look at numbers like this and see how those develop over time. Finally, aviation. Air Tanzania, after 20 years of being out of the Kenyan markets, Air Tanzania is going to be resuming flights between Dar es Salaam and Nairobi. They said this is due to improved bilateral relations between Tanzania and Kenya, also tourism. They did mention that, okay, because markets, global markets are opening back up and more people are traveling, that's the reason for this. Of course, we have the Omicron variant and all that other issues that have developed recently. But Air Tanzania, they're expanding across a number of other African nations, and Kenya is a big market for them. That's our update for today.
Right. A lot of stories you have there, Rotus. Let me see the ones I can piggyback on. Uganda and coffee. Yeah, Uganda pretty much survives a lot in agriculture. They've been able to iterate this over the years. And most of the factories, I should tell you, are not really owned by Ugandans. They are owned by Indians, they're owned by Pakistanis, and the long history, about that. So, and the government too is helping to invest in all of that. They've done very well in sugar too themselves. I think what we can learn from Uganda is we have great potential too for cocoa. I mean, for coffee in some parts of the north. We should look at that. And there's an area too I like to talk about a lot that we don't look at in this country. We've got great potential to be able to churn out gum arabic. Gum arabic is used as a constituent in most fizzy drinks around the world. I mean, one of the biggest fizzy drink supplier uses a lot of gum arabic, and we have a lot of them here. So it is something we can harness effectively here, but if we look at it critically. I'll quickly move to Flutterwave. Two things that's working for Flutterwave. Flutterwave have the data for SMEs because obviously they're a payment service and they've got lots of merchants on their site. And secondly, they can just iterate the data and create a market space and also solve the problem of payment because they have a payment gateway. So it's easy peasy for them. And that's the iteration of technology you see in the world. Increasingly, companies that have great scale as regards payment will definitely segue into marketplace for SMEs and the likes. And that's a possibility, we have to look at. And Flutter is only doing that. I need to wrap up. I'm done so other people can have a chance to stab at it.
Well, I'd like to comment on the 4-day work week that is being proposed by the Kaduna State government. I think it's forward-looking. One of the major outcomes of our experience with COVID-19 pandemic is that COVID-19 redefined the future of work. In terms of workspace, in terms of the number of days, in fact, in terms of how work is structured, and in terms of the dynamics of relations within the workspace. Because you'll find that with restrictions, with lockdowns, many people started working from home. And, the expectation is that after COVID, our world will not be the same again. However, with regard to the 3-day weekend and 4-day work week, there have been experimentations in Iceland, in Japan, in New Zealand. As recently as August, a congressman in the United States was pushing for a 4-day work week. And the argument is that where there have been pilots, even in Canada, that productivity had not, was not affected. That if anything, the advantage of it is in terms of work-life balance And I see that in Kaduna State, the governor is talking about this work-life balance. So it may well work, backed with the appropriate legislation. But I hope that the state government will take the necessary steps. You have to look, do a pilot first to look at the cost implications. You have to do also in the pilot phase to look at implications for productivity, because it's not necessarily that something works in Japan and New Zealand and has been experimented with in Canada, that it will necessarily work in Nigeria, because, you know, culture is also very important when we borrow some of these concepts. The other concern that I have with regard to Kaduna State is that the government is looking at Friday, you know, as that other day when people can work from home, supported by technology. I hope that, you know, given the multicultural, pluralistic nature of Kaduna State and how religion is so sensitive in that place, that you will not have at some point people coming up and saying, oh, there is another reason beyond work-life balance, or that there is religion behind it. This is being done to serve the purpose of Muslims. And that is why it is important in going in that direction that the Kaduna State government will have to carry the people along, stakeholder involvement, and make it very clear that this is not about religion. That may be where the challenge lies.
Oh, you know us too well. Well, thank you so much, Rhodes, as we've run out of time. Moving on to more business updates, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, good morning. It was sort of buying of the dips yesterday. There was a bit of a reset as far as the markets were concerned, given the panic that hit them on Friday, and they're still basically panicking yesterday. I suppose the best way to put it is it's a sort of choppy holding pattern for the markets right now, because of the COVID variant and so on. President Biden tried to attempt to soothe nerves overnight. I don't think it particularly succeeded. But what really drove some of the calming down was anecdotal reports from South African medical establishments that actually the symptoms are milder than the Delta variant. Well, we'll see about that. So therefore, shares in Asia Pacific fairly mixed in Tuesday's trade. Investors really looking at what the World Health Organization was going. Again, like I said yesterday, investors trying to get a measure of what's actually going on. As far as China's concerned, their official purchasing managers index came in at 50.1. That's above the 50 level, and that's actually quite good as far as that's concerned. Shares of that Sun City Group I told you about in Hong Kong, they went down about 40% today after the firm's chairman was arrested by Macau police for alleged links to illegal cross-border gambling activities. Let's recap what happened in the United States then. Futures are rising, really, as the markets get back to feeling vaguely positive. I only say vaguely because, again, we're still trying to get to terms with what's actually going on. The overnight action came after a sort of broad comeback yesterday. Joe Biden said economic lockdowns are currently off the table, and there'll be no new travel restrictions. That's in the United States. So the Dow up 200 points. But I would draw caution across this because the Moderna CEO is saying that existing vaccines may struggle to tackle Omicron. Futures on the Dow therefore gained about 100 points. And basically things looking not too bad. Jay Powell's going to be talking to the Senate, as is Janet Yellen today. He believes that the Omicron variant of COVID-19 and a recent rise in coronavirus cases pose a threat to the US economy. That's what he's going to tell the Senate today. Worries over the new variant could reduce people's willingness to work in person. That will be what he'll be actually saying. And Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen will also be talking to the Senate Banking Committee today. Now, we know that US Twitter boss Jack Dorsey is stepping down. The Parag Agrawal is the name we're going to hear a great deal about. He's the senior technical officer, CTO at the moment. He's going to be CEO. What is Mr. Dorsey going to do? Well, that's shrouded in mystery, really. Nothing's really been said about what his next move is going to be. But he has said in the past, if I were not at Square, that's the financial settlements thing, or Twitter, I'd be working on Bitcoin. So people are thinking that that's probably where he's actually going to place some of his activity. Let's come to Europe and German inflation, 6%, really high. Why do we care about? Well, because the Germans do. Because their history has always been trying to reduce inflation, given the hyperinflation of the years between the two world wars. It has terrible memories for people in Germany, even though some of them, of course, were not alive during those. But certainly, family savings just disappeared completely. To the UK, and businesses have been warning. The Omicron variant could hit business. I mean, there's no great surprise about that. And, even the additional thing now about variant contacts of people who've been in touch with this have to now isolate for 10 days. Executives are hoping that mask wearing will help. It's become compulsory on public transport today. As far as COVID's concerned, the hospitality industry is naturally very worried about this as well. The sector's been allowed to operate free from restrictions since the 19th of July. That probably is now going to change, and that will create enormous problems for that big industry. UK, the supermarket giant Asda has chartered a cargo ship to prevent Christmas empty shelves. It's going along the lines basically of John Lewis, Costco in the UK, John Lewis in the UK, Costco and Walmart in the US. They've also hired big container ships to try to help with supply chains. And here's one. We've often talked about this, the furlough scheme. Apparently HMRC, that's the tax authorities in the UK, have only blocked 28 million of suspect COVID claims. Estimates were close to losing about 5.3 billion in these furlough schemes, which were rushed out. HMRC paid about £70 billion to keep the schemes going, and it's widely credited with avoiding mass unemployment, but still not really on top of that. As far as oil's concerned, this is an interesting one. I wonder what OPEC Plus is going to do when it meets. Might there be a case of reducing the supply of oil? Russia was saying just recently, in fact, overnight, early this morning, that they've not been approached by anybody else within OPEC Plus to reduce production, especially. But compliance is well over 50%. So OPEC Plus will have a lot to talk about when they actually meet towards the end of the week. And finally, gold price action really just underwhelms, basically. You'd expect during these times of uncertainty more people to pile in there. They haven't. It's closed below its various daily moving averages between 1791 and 1792 an ounce. That's your global review this morning.
All right, Michael, I want to stop at Germany this morning, and it's a good thing you took us, back memory lane, and historically, I should say, because the Germans know too well about inflation, and that's why I'm scared about this 6%. I mean, it's one of the largest inflation rates in over 20 years or 30 years in Germany. That's why it's for concern. Because when you look at it historically, after the Second World War, Germany suffered hyperinflation. In fact, even before the Second World War, so much that they created a currency called Rentimark that was pegged against rent, real estate rent, because the currency had lost totally its value. And it is scary that Germany is increasingly, with post-COVID pandemic getting to that level again with 6% in Germany. And a lot of people still argue that it's not time to cut interest rates yet. That's one. Number two, let's talk about another man in Turkey. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, only God knows what he's doing. He's come out yesterday to say the people should fight back because it's the West that is causing his economic woes. As we speak, the likes of Apple and some other tech companies have pulled out of Turkey because they don't even know the value of the currency to peg their dollar against to be able to make collections for their services. What is happening?
Well, it's a mystery, isn't it? I mean, we've discussed what's going on in Turkey. It's an autocratic state. I don't think anybody, I don't know, it might be happening in North Korea, but then again, what would we know about that? But generally speaking, the whole point about interest rates is that, I mean, common usage around the world is that if you get inflation, you raise interest rates to try to contain it. It appears to be the worst in Turkey. I mean, the withdrawal of those companies you're talking about speaks for itself, doesn't it? If you don't know how much the lira is going to be worth, then you can't operate. You can't operate. It's a bit like Afghanistan, really. It doesn't have a real currency anymore. So how on earth do you trade with it, not knowing if you're going to get paid, as you've quite rightly observed? As far as Germany's concerned, look, we don't know. It might be a spike. I think that they will be desperately worried about this. A lot of Germans resented the fact that the ECB took over what they felt to be the role of the Bundesbank all those years ago, because the Bundesbank was the absolute level of probity as far as interest rates and inflation was concerned. Again, as you observed, the memories go long and deep, and they certainly do not want to get back to those levels of ruinous inflation. Nobody's suggesting that it's getting near to the sort of Zimbabwean levels or indeed the mid-war levels of Germany at the moment, but it's sort of creeping up there. I think the ECB is probably going to have to act at some stage, but there won't be in any hurry to do it if what Christine Lagarde has been saying recently is anything to go by.
Well, clearly, it doesn't look like the ECB is in a hurry. Christine Lagarde is saying that, look, on the basis of a one-off cost of inflation, that the ECB is not likely to tighten monetary policy. Energy prices resulted in the inflation in Germany up to about 6%. But if you look at Spain and Belgium, 5.6% also in terms of consumer prices going up. And the inflation data that the ECB is likely to report today, there's speculation that it's going to be about 4.4%. Beyond the target of 2%. But the question is the optimism of the ECB, is it well placed or is it misplaced? We probably will not know until next year, when Christine Lagarde says all of this, will just pass, and the anxiety that is being expressed may not be in order. Now, Jack Dorsey, well, you try to answer the question, what next for him? I guess his exit is not unexpected. Particularly with one of the stakeholders, Elliott Management, 4% stake in Twitter, complaining about his combination of leadership roles in Twitter and the digital payment company, Square. But he raised a point about founders staying too long, and that's not necessarily a good thing for business. Do you share that view, particularly as you have seen other founders leaving some of these high-tech businesses and moving on? And what is the future? The chief technical officer who is taking over, do you think that the company will even do better under him, given the problematic relationship that Jack Dorsey has had, and it became almost an obstacle in the view of some people, some stakeholders, to the expansion of the business?
I share, first of all, I share your concerns about the ECB. And again, as you say, we're just going to have to wait to see what they say about it in the early part of next year. It's certainly something that, as you say, they don't appear to be very ready to act. I mean, I don't see why not, because, as you quite rightly say, that average figure is well over their 2% target. But that was a long time ago. I think still this question, and again, it hasn't been answered yet. I'd still go to is it a spike or is it sustained? We just simply don't know. As far as Twitter's concerned, I mean, it's grown up now. It's not the frivolous kind of thing that you would send little notes to your friends about, or make your opinions known to the rest of the world. It actually is an extremely powerful social media instrument, and with that power comes an enormous amount of responsibility. I don't know what a chief technical officer brings to the table, quite honestly, but Jack Dorsey seemed to think that the company was sort of outgrowing what he thought it would be. My guess is, again, I'm only going on what the markets are saying, into cryptocurrencies and more time with Bitcoin, but the future of Twitter is like the future of all social media platforms. It depends so much on the legal weapons that are brought to bear on it, given that a lot of children, for example, are seeing things on Twitter that would not be repeated to them, we hope, in real life. And that goes for so-called grown-ups as well. It's just become, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I certainly don't use it for myself, and I barely look at it because there's just a lot of unpleasant noise on it right now from people who I'm not really concerned about. I mean, it's as simple as that. So I think it needs to find a new it needs to find a new existence somehow within the law. I think that the payment system, the Square thing that Jack Dorsey started, is very much more interesting. And if he's going to indulge in cryptocurrencies, well, that's what we may be paying in the future.